For years, people watched me change, but they never heard why. I didn't hold a press conference. I didn't call anyone out. I didn't explain myself. But quietly, I admitted something that changed how I live, how I believe, and how I breathe. Not by naming names, not by pointing fingers. I'm just by choosing honesty for the first time. This is the part of my story I never said out loud. For a long time, I believed silence was strength. I was raised to think that explaining yourself meant weakness, that boundaries were disrespectful, that loyalty meant never questioning the people who raised you. So I stayed quiet, not because nothing hurt, but because I didn't know how to speak without feeling guilty. People assume change happens suddenly, that one day you wake up and decide to be different. That's not how it happened for me. It started with small thoughts I wasn't supposed to have, questions I quickly pushed away, feelings I told myself were wrong. I smiled on camera. I followed the script, and I convinced myself that discomfort was normal. But deep down, something didn't fit anymore. Not my faith, not my family, not even my past. Just the way I was taught to ignore my own voice. And the hardest part wasn't realizing that something was wrong. It was realizing that I was allowed to admit it, even quietly. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to leave anything behind. I just started noticing how tired I was, not physically, but emotionally. Tired of explaining myself in my head, tired of feeling anxious for asking simple questions, tired of believing that discomfort was something I had to earn. For a long time, I told myself this was just adulthood, that growing up meant swallowing feelings and calling it maturity. But then I started hearing my own thoughts more clearly. I noticed how often I said yes, yes, when my body was saying no. How often I stayed quiet to keep peace I didn't actually feel. How often I measured my worth by how well I followed expectations. I wasn't angry. I wasn't rebelling. I was just listening. Listening to the tightness in my chest when certain conversations came up. Listening to the relief I felt when I stepped back instead of leaning in. Listening to the calm that came when I allowed myself space. That's when I realized something important. Change doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like choosing silence for your own protection. And I started making quiet choices, not to hurt anyone, but to finally take care of myself. I didn't announce it. I didn't explain it. I just changed how close I stood to things that no longer felt safe for me. And for the first time in my life, that choice felt honest. There's a moment in life when you realize something quiet but powerful. You can believe in God and still question the system built around him. For a long time, I thought doubt meant failure, that if I questioned anything, it meant my faith was weak. So I didn't question out loud. I questioned in silence. I read the same verses over and over, hoping they would settle the unease. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they made the questions louder. What I was really struggling with wasn't belief. It was fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of disappointing people who loved me. Fear of what would happen if I admitted that some answers no longer fit my life. I learned early on that certainty was rewarded. Confidence was praised. Obedience was admired. But curiosity was dangerous. So I became very good at appearing certain, even when I wasn't. Inside, I felt torn between two versions of myself, the one who wanted to be faithful and the one who wanted to be honest. And honesty felt risky because honesty doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with consequences. I wasn't trying to escape faith. I was trying to understand it without fear attached. I started asking different questions. Not, what am I allowed to believe? But what actually brings me peace? And the answer surprised me. Peace didn't come from having every answer. It came from letting go of the pressure to have them. That's when I realized something else. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're still learning. Not everyone will understand that. Some will see it as betrayal. Others will call it change, but for me, it was the first time my faith felt real instead of rehearsed. When I finally accepted that I was allowed to think differently, the next question wasn't what I believed anymore. It was how much of myself I was allowed to show. That's where boundaries entered my life. Not as walls, not as punishments, but as protection. I used to believe boundaries were rude. That saying, "This hurts," meant you were ungrateful. That stepping back meant you didn't love enough. So I didn't set them. I absorbed everything instead. I absorbed expectations that weren't mine. I absorbed responsibility for other people's comfort. I absorbed silence, even when it cost me peace. But something changed when I stopped explaining myself. I realized I didn't owe everyone access to my inner world, especially when sharing it meant defending it. Distance didn't come from anger. It came from clarity. I didn't pull away dramatically. I didn't make ultimatums. I simply stopped stepping into spaces that made me shrink. And that decision, as quiet as it was, felt heavier than any argument could have, because distance makes people ask questions and silence doesn't answer them. Some people assumed the worst. Others filled the gaps with their own stories. I let them. Not because I didn't care, but because correcting every misunderstanding would have meant reopening wounds I was still learning to close. I learned that boundaries don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they look like fewer conversations. Sometimes they look like shorter visits. Sometimes they look like choosing rest instead of proving a point. I didn't stop loving anyone. I stopped abandoning myself. And that choice required more strength than staying quiet ever did before. Silence is often misunderstood. People think silence means agreement. They think it means fear. They think it means you have nothing to say. For me, silence meant something else entirely. It meant choosing peace over performance. It meant refusing to turn my life into an explanation. It meant protecting parts of myself that were still healing. I learned very quickly that the moment you speak publicly, your truth stops being yours. It becomes something people analyze, something they debate, something they reshape to fit their own beliefs. I wasn't ready for that. And more importantly, I didn't need it. I didn't need validation from strangers to know what I had lived through was real. So I stayed quiet, not because I had nothing to admit, but because I finally understood when and how to admit it. I admitted it in private conversations, in safe spaces, with people who listened instead of reacted. I admitted that some things I was taught no longer worked for me, that some expectations felt heavier than loving, that obedience without understanding had cost me more than I realized. And I admitted something even harder, that I had spent years believing my discomfort was a personal failure, when it was actually a signal that something needed to change. I didn't name names because this story was never about blame. It was about honesty. Blame creates sides. Honesty creates clarity. I wasn't trying to expose anyone. I was trying to stop hiding from myself. Silence gave me room to grow without pressure, to change without defensiveness, to live without constantly preparing an explanation. And in that quiet space, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't pretending anymore. That relief became the foundation for everything that followed. Healing doesn't begin with answers. It begins with permission. Permission to admit that something affected you. Permission to stop minimizing your own experience. Permission to say, this mattered to me. even if others don't understand why. For a long time, I believed healing was something you did privately, quietly, without help. I believed strength meant handling everything on your own. That asking for support meant you weren't faithful enough. That if you prayed harder, the weight would disappear. But the weight stayed. Not because I wasn't trying hard enough, but because I was carrying things I was never meant to carry alone. Therapy wasn't about blaming anyone. It wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about understanding how the past shaped me and deciding what I wanted to keep and what I was finally ready to release. I learned that healing isn't about erasing your story. It's about making sense of it. I learned how often I had silenced myself to make others comfortable. How often I confused obedience with self-worth. How often I ignored my own needs because I didn't think they mattered. And slowly, something shifted. I stopped apologizing for my feelings. I stopped explaining my boundaries, and I stopped measuring my growth by how acceptable it looked to others. Healing taught me that I'm allowed to change, even if people prefer the version of me that stayed quiet. I'm allowed to rest without justifying it. I'm allowed to grow without asking permission. And I'm allowed to take responsibility for my own life, even when that responsibility looks different than what others expected of me. That realization didn't make me bitter. It made me grounded. For the first time, I felt like my life belonged to me, not as a rebellion, not as a statement, but as a choice, and that choice to heal honestly changed everything that came after. I used to think freedom came from approval, from knowing I was doing everything right, from fitting perfectly into expectations that were never questioned. But real freedom didn't come that way. It came quietly. It came the moment I stopped asking who I needed to be and started asking who I already was. I didn't lose my family. I didn't lose my faith. And I didn't lose my past. I gained something else. I gained the ability to live honestly without explaining every step. I learned that love doesn't require silence, but it also doesn't demand exposure. Some stories don't need to be told loudly to be true. Some changes don't need witnesses to be real. And some admissions, the most important ones, are the ones you make to yourself first. I didn't name names because this journey was never about blame. It was about responsibility. Responsibility for my beliefs, my boundaries, and the life I choose to live now. I understand now that growth doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like peace. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to explain. If there's one thing I hope people understand, it's this: you can change without rejecting where you came from. You can heal without turning your story into a spectacle. And you can move forward quietly without breaking ties. That's what I finally admitted. Not out loud, but honestly. And that honesty changed everything.